Welcome to Personal Injury Claims Explained by Foyle Legal, your trusted source for personal injury claims in Western Australia. Each week, we simplify complex legal issues, from motor vehicle accidents to workplace injuries, so you can confidently navigate your rights and secure the compensation you deserve.
Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always up for a good deep dive.
Okay, so today we're tackling a topic that, well, it could hit close to home for some of you, I think. We're going to be talking about the long-term consequences of severe motor vehicle accidents. And to really bring this to life,
Oh, okay.
we're going to use a real case from Western Australia.
All right.
It's called Injured Passenger XV at Fault Driver Y. It's a 2017 case, WADC 155. And it really illustrates how these incidents can have a ripple effect for years, really, even decades after the initial impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people think, once the broken bones are healed, you're good to go. But as we'll see in this case, some of the most debilitating consequences are the ones you can't see. The cognitive deficits, the psychological trauma, the impact on earning capacity, things like that.
Right, yeah. And to help us navigate all the legal complexities here, we've got some insights from the experts at Foyle Legal. Now, they specialize in personal injury law, and they actually wrote a whole blog post breaking down this very case, which is super helpful. Okay, get this. In this case, the plaintiff was awarded a staggering $945,212.
Whoa.
Yeah, and the breakdown of that figure, it really highlights how much more is at stake
Right.
than just those immediate medical bills,
For sure. It's a really powerful illustration of how the legal system tries to quantify not just the physical trauma, but also all those, invisible costs of an accident. Things like lost future earnings, ongoing care needs, and just, the diminished quality of life.
Right. So let's actually dive into the specifics of this case. Okay, so picture this. It's January 2002, a seemingly ordinary day in Falcon, Western Australia. A 7-year-old girl, she's the plaintiff in our case.
Okay.
And she's in the car with her mother, driving along Old Mandurah Road.
Yeah.
Suddenly, they collide with a parked vehicle, and the impact is so forceful that the car actually flips and lands on its side.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, pretty scary stuff.
Um,
And unfortunately, the court found that the mother's negligent driving was the cause of the accident.
oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a tragic reminder, I think,
Yeah.
that these incidents often happen due to human error.
Right.
And the consequences, as we're seeing, can be devastating.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Now, the little girl, our plaintiff, suffered some, just horrific injuries, extensive skull and facial fractures, a brain confusion. Now, that's basically bruising of the brain. And there was even evidence of a compound fracture, meaning the bone broke in a way that exposed it to the outside.
Oh, wow.
She even had a seizure before surgery.
So serious. Yeah. And to treat those injuries, she needed a craniotomy, which is, where they remove a part of the skull to access the brain. Plus, they needed plating to hold the bones together and repair of a dural tear.
Okay, wait, a dural tear? I'm guessing most people, myself included, don't know what that is.
Yeah, good catch. So the dura is this tough membrane that surrounds the brain and spinal cord. And a tear in that membrane can be very serious, as it can lead to leakage of cerebrospinal fluid. It's definitely a complication you want to avoid.
Yeah, no kidding. So we're talking major brain surgery here at 7 years old.
Yeah.
It really makes you realize that the initial trauma is just the beginning of the story, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that brings us to, all those long-term consequences. Now, obviously, there were physical scars, right, on her forehead, her eyelid, and her nose. These are constant, visible reminders of the accident. And she also developed something called blepharoptosis, which is basically a drooping eyelid.
Blepharoptosis. Okay, that's another one for the glossary. I'm sensing a theme here. But seriously, you're right. These visible reminders, they probably have a huge impact on her self-esteem and social interactions.
Absolutely. And the medical reports actually specifically mention that these disfigurements are, noticeable in photos and social situations. So I imagine that adds an extra layer of, self-consciousness.
It's heartbreaking to think about. And we haven't even gotten to those invisible injuries yet. Now, 15 years pass, and the plaintiff, who's now a young adult, decides to file a lawsuit.
Okay.
So-
And this is where things get interesting from a legal standpoint, right? Because remember, the defense, they're always going to try to minimize their liability. So in this case, they argued that not all of her problems were actually caused by the accident. They pointed to a pre-existing condition that she had called gastroschisis, which is a birth defect affecting the abdominal wall. They also vaguely referenced, family problems. And they even hinted that she might be exaggerating her symptoms.
So basically, they were trying to muddy the waters,
Hmm.
shift the blame, and just create doubt about the plaintiff's credibility.
Exactly. It's a classic defense strategy in these types of cases. But the court, thankfully, they dug deeper and looked at all the evidence, and that's where the real story starts to emerge.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What did they uncover?
Well, the plaintiff underwent neuropsychological testing. Remember, this is 15 years after the accident. And those tests, they revealed some pretty significant cognitive deficits. She had trouble with memory, attention, concentration, information processing speed, all of those mental functions that are essential for learning, for working, and just for navigating daily life.
So it's not just about the physical scars.
Mm.
It's like the accident impacted her ability to think, to learn, to function at her full potential.
Precisely. And it's often these, invisible injuries
Right.
that have the most profound impact on a person's life.
It's almost like a hidden injury, like the battle being fought within her own mind, and it all stems from that accident.
You're exactly right. And one of the experts who evaluated her, Dr. Keene, concluded that based on her parents' backgrounds, she should have been functioning in the average range cognitively.
Right.
But the accident, it altered that trajectory.
Now, you mentioned psychological trauma earlier. What did that look like in this case? I mean, it seems almost inevitable given everything she's been through.
You would think so, right? Well, the plaintiff was indeed diagnosed with major depressive disorder. And she showed, clear signs of trauma-related symptoms. The court actually brought in 2 psychiatrists to evaluate her. Dr. Antose, who was chosen by the plaintiff, and Dr. Tay, who was chosen by the defense.
Wait, 2 psychiatrists? Why 2? Is that normal in these cases?
It can happen, especially when there's, disagreement about the severity or the cause of the psychological issues. Dr. Antose, for example, he really emphasized the impact of the facial disfigurement and the cognitive deficits on the plaintiff's, self-esteem, relationships, and ability to hold down a job. He really painted this picture of how all these factors were, intertwined and stemming from the accident.
That makes sense. It's not just about one isolated injury. It's about how they all feed into each other and create this ripple effect. What did the other psychiatrist, Dr. Tay, have to say?
Well, he actually downplayed the role of the accident. And he suggested that other factors, like, those family issues that the defense had brought up, were more responsible for her problems. He even went so far as to question her honesty.
Wow, that's pretty harsh. So the court basically had to play referee between these 2 very different expert opinions.
Yeah, they had to weigh the evidence, consider the credibility of each expert, and ultimately decide whose assessment was more persuasive. And in this case, they sided with Dr. Antose, finding his assessment more, credible and comprehensive.
Okay, so the court acknowledged the extent of her injuries, both physical and psychological, and the fact that they were directly linked to the accident. But how do they translate all that suffering into a dollar amount? That's what I'm really curious about.
That's the million-dollar question, literally, in this case.
I see what you did there. So tell me, how did they arrive at that massive $945,212 figure? Was it just a random number?
Not at all. It's a carefully calculated breakdown of different types of damages, all designed to compensate the plaintiff for her losses, both past and future.
Okay, I'm ready for a legal lesson. Break it down for me. What are these different types of damages, and how do they factor into the final amount?
Let's start with the concept of pain and suffering, which is kind of a catch-all term. Yeah, it basically encompasses both the physical pain and also the emotional distress she's endured. Think about it. Years of surgeries,
Yeah.
Ongoing discomfort from her injuries, and just the psychological burden of those, visible scars. The court awarded her $206,000 just for this category alone.
Wow. $206,000 just for pain and suffering. I mean, it really underscores that this is about more than just like fixing a broken bone. It's about acknowledging that profound impact that these injuries have on every aspect of her life.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that this is just one piece of the puzzle. The court also had to consider, her lost earning capacity because of her cognitive deficits and, those ongoing health issues. She hasn't been able to hold down a steady job.
So how do they calculate something like that? I mean, it's not like there's a set formula for lost potential, right?
You're right. It's not an exact science. But they do look at things like her education, her work history, or lack thereof in this case, and just the types of jobs that she might have been able to, pursue if the accident hadn't happened.
So they're trying to project her potential earnings onto her current situation, factoring in all those limitations caused by the accident.
Exactly. And based on those projections, they awarded her $162,000 for past lost earning capacity and a whopping $307,924 for future lost earning capacity. This really recognizes that, her ability to earn a living, it's been permanently compromised.
That's a substantial amount. It's a stark reminder that the financial repercussions of these accidents can be, well, significant and also long-lasting.
Absolutely. And we haven't even touched on the costs associated with, Pear. Remember, she's had extensive medical treatment over the years, and she'll likely need, ongoing care and therapy in the future.
So the court takes all those expenses into account as well. It's like they're trying to create a financial safety net to make sure she has the resources she needs to cope with, like those ongoing challenges.
That's a good way to put it. They awarded a significant amount, though the exact figure wasn't specified in the blog post, for past and future care, medical expenses, and vocational support. This might include things like physical therapy, psychotherapy, assistance with, daily living tasks, and maybe even job training programs.
It's like they're trying to predict the future, trying to anticipate all the potential needs that might arise down the road.
Exactly. It's about making her whole again as much as possible by addressing all the ways the accident has, impacted her life.
Now, this whole case, it makes you think, doesn't it? Like, if you were ever in this situation, would you know what steps to take, what your rights are? Is a bit overwhelming.
It is. And that's why having, legal representation is so crucial. Firms like Foyle Legal, they specialize in these types of cases, and they just know how to navigate all the complexities of, personal injury law.
And it's not just about knowing the law, is it? It's about having someone in your corner who understands what you're going through, who can, advocate for you effectively.
Absolutely. They can help you gather the necessary evidence, build a strong case, and, fight for the compensation you deserve.
Okay, so let's say you're listening to this and you've, well, unfortunately been in a serious accident. What's the first thing you should do?
First and foremost, seek medical attention, immediately. Even if you don't think you're seriously injured, get checked out by a doctor. Sometimes those injuries, they don't manifest right away, especially when it comes to head trauma.
So prioritize your health. Get yourself checked out. What then?
Once you're medically stable, reach out to a personal injury lawyer as soon as possible. The sooner you get legal representation, the better.
Why is that? What's the advantage of acting quickly?
Well, for starters, there are statutes of limitations, personal injury claims. You don't want to miss any deadlines. But beyond that, evidence can be lost, or memories can just fade over time.
So early intervention is key, both for your health and for the strength of your legal case.
Exactly. And don't just rely on your memory. Document everything. Keep a journal of your symptoms, your medical appointments, your, limitations.
That's where that paper trail comes in handy, right? The one you were talking about earlier.
You got it. Detailed documentation is essential, especially for proving the extent of your injuries, especially those that are less visible, like cognitive issues or psychological trauma. You'd be surprised how much weight those personal accounts carry in court.
So keep those medical records organized, document everything, and seek legal counsel. What else can we learn from this case? What other insights jumped out at you?
One thing that really struck me is, how the defense tried to minimize the impact of the accident by focusing on the plaintiff's pre-existing condition and those vague family problems. They even tried to use her love of horseback riding against her.
Wait, really? How do they spin that?
Well, they suggested that if she was able to, enjoy horseback riding, then her cognitive and psychological impairments couldn't be that severe.
That's just wrong.
Yeah.
They're trying to punish her for finding, joy in her life, despite her challenges.
It's a common tactic, unfortunately. They'll look for anything they can use to, discredit the plaintiff's claims. But thankfully, the court saw through it. They recognized that her passion for horses was really a testament to, her resilience, her determination to live a fulfilling life despite the obstacles she faces.
That's an important point. It's they were trying to say that if you're still able to, find moments of happiness, your suffering must not be that bad.
Mm.
But the court understood that resilience doesn't negate the very real impact of those injuries.
Exactly. And this
Yeah.
is where having a skilled lawyer can make all the difference, They can anticipate these types of arguments, counter them effectively, and ensure that the focus remains on the true impact of the accident.
Now, this whole case makes you think about the bigger picture, doesn't it? It's not just about this one woman's struggle. It raises questions about how we as a society support those who've suffered, life-altering injuries. We're talking long-term care, rehabilitation, vocational training, psychological support. It's a lot.
You're absolutely right. This case really highlights a crucial societal need. for, comprehensive support systems. A one-time payout, no matter how large, it can only go so far. People need ongoing resources and services to rebuild their lives after such, trauma.
Right. It's about creating a system that recognizes the long-term nature of these challenges.
Yeah.
And provides the necessary support for people to not just, survive, but thrive.
Absolutely. We need to be thinking about accessibility, affordability, and ensuring that these services are available to everyone who needs them, regardless of, their financial situation.
It's like we need a shift in perspective, moving beyond that immediate crisis and recognizing that the journey of recovery, it's often a marathon, not a sprint.
That's a perfect analogy. It's a long road. And people need support, every step of the way.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's circle back to a detail from the case. Remember how we mentioned the plaintiff's mother, who was driving at the time? She had some experience as an ambulance officer.
Yeah, I found that detail particularly poignant.
Me too. It really brings home the message that accidents can happen to anyone. Regardless of experience or background, you never know when one moment of distraction, one lapse in judgment, can have, life-altering consequences.
It's a sobering reminder for all of us, isn't it? We need to be, extra careful when we're behind the wheel. You never know how one moment can change everything.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of having empathy for those involved in accidents, understanding that even the most well-intentioned drivers can make mistakes with, far-reaching repercussions.
Now, this case also brings up the issue of damages and how they're assessed in these situations, right? It's not just about plugging numbers into a formula. There's a lot of nuance and legal expertise involved.
So tell me, when we're talking about damages in a case like this, what factors come into play?
Well, you've got, those economic damages, things like medical expenses, lost wages, future care costs, which we've already kind of talked about. But then there's this whole other category called non-economic damages, and that's where things get a little more complicated.
Non-economic damages. Okay, I'm intrigued. What exactly falls under that umbrella? It sounds like it's more about like the intangible impact of the accident.
You're exactly right. Non-economic damages are meant to compensate for things that are, harder to put a price tag on. Things like pain and suffering, emotional distress, loss of enjoyment of life. Think about the plaintiff in our case. The social anxiety stemming from her facial disfigurement, the limitations on her activities due to those cognitive deficits, the constant, fear and anxiety that might linger from the trauma, those are all, real tangible impacts, even though they don't come with a receipt.
Right. It's like acknowledging those invisible wounds, the ones that don't show up on an X-ray, but can be just as debilitating. So how on earth do you put a dollar amount on something like emotional distress or loss of enjoyment of life?
That's where legal precedent and, judicial discretion come into play. There's no magic formula, but the court considers factors like the severity of the injuries, the plaintiff's age, their overall quality of life, and how the accident has affected their daily activities and relationships. They also rely on expert testimony from, psychologists and other specialists to kind of paint a clear picture of those non-economic damages.
It sounds like it's more of an art than a science, trying to quantify those intangible losses. And that's where having a skilled lawyer in your corner can make all the difference, right?
Yeah.
Someone who can effectively present your case and argue for the maximum compensation you deserve, both, economic and non-economic.
Absolutely. Lawyers specializing in, personal injury like those at Foyle Legal, they're well-versed in these complexities, and they know how to build a compelling argument that resonates with the court. They can gather the necessary evidence, including expert testimony, to support your claims and just fight for your rights every step of the way.
Thinking about the case of injured passenger X, it's a powerful illustration, I think, of how the legal system can provide a measure of justice, not just by holding the at-fault driver accountable, but also by recognizing the profound and lasting impact of the accident on the victim's life.
It's a reminder that a single moment of negligence can have, far-reaching consequences. And while no amount of money can truly erase the pain and suffering endured, it can help alleviate, those financial burdens and provide the necessary resources for the victim to rebuild their life.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about, hasn't it? I'm curious, what are your biggest takeaways so far?
For me, it's the realization that, the true cost of an accident, it extends far beyond those initial medical bills. It's about those invisible wounds, the lost opportunities, the ongoing challenges that can really impact every aspect of a person's life. And it underscores the importance of having legal support, right?
Yeah.
To navigate those complexities of the system and secure fair compensation for all those losses.
I completely agree. It's a stark reminder that we need to be, vigilant on the roads, advocating for safer driving practices,
Yeah.
and supporting policies that prioritize, pedestrian and cyclist safety. Because, as we've seen in this case, the ripple effects of an accident can be profound and long-lasting, not just for the victim, but for their loved ones and the community as a whole.
Well said. So, dear listener, if you've been injured in a motor vehicle accident or know someone who has, remember that you're not alone. There are resources available to help you navigate the legal system, access the necessary care, and find support on your journey to recovery.
It's exactly. Organizations like Foyle Legal, they offer a wealth of information and guidance on their website and blog, breaking down complex legal concepts into, plain English. Don't hesitate to reach out for help. Because as we've seen today, knowledge is power, and having the right support can make all the difference in securing the justice and compensation you deserve.
Now, before we wrap up completely, let's take a moment to circle back to our, grounding context. The plaintiff's mother, who was driving at the time of the accident, mentioned that she had some experience as an ambulance officer.
That's interesting. You'd think someone with that background would be extra cautious behind the wheel.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? It just goes to show that accidents can happen to anyone, regardless of experience or background.
It's a sobering reminder for all of us, isn't it? We need to be extra careful when we're behind the wheel. You never know how one moment can change everything.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of having empathy for those involved in accidents, understanding that even, the most well-intentioned drivers can make mistakes with, life-altering consequences.
Well said. So, dear listener, as you head back into the world, I encourage you to reflect on what you've learned today. Think about the long-term impacts of severe accidents, the importance of seeking legal help and documenting everything, and the need for empathy and support for accident victims.
And if you're interested in learning more about, motor vehicle accident claims, or if you need legal assistance, don't hesitate to reach out to Foyle Legal. They're experts in this field, and they can provide the guidance and support you need.
Exactly. You can find more information on their website and blog, and remember, stay safe out there.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep those wheels turning in the right direction.
Thanks for tuning in to Personal Injury Claims explained by Foyle Legal. Remember, this podcast is for informational purposes and isn't legal advice. For advice specific to your situation, visit us at Foyle Legal. And don't forget to subscribe or leave a review.